let's dive into our first panel. During the panel, also, please feel free to send in questions for the Q&A portion, just like some of you just did, using the chat function on the right-hand side of the stage. The SBIR and STTR programs are the largest sources of non-dilutive funding available to small businesses and one of the best ways to help you move further towards the commercial market. However, between varying proposal requirements, different defining characteristics of innovation, and knowing agency focal points, it can be hard to navigate the process and create a complete and compelling proposal. In the panel you're about to hear, you're going to hear from agency representatives, reviewers, assistance providers, and even awardees on how to navigate this process as a first-time applicant. But you will even learn things if this is your 10th time applying. I would like to now welcome our moderator, Elden Hawks, to the stage. Elden has a long history that includes work for the USDA. Now Elden serves as the Partnership and Innovation Specialist at the SBA, a role that supports the advancement of the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs. His primary duties include managing the agency's federal and state technology partnership program. And he will be joined by panelists Henry Ahn, Dana Catron, Jim Greenwood, and Roch Hart. Elden, the floor is yours.
Looks like we lost Elden.
Elden, you with us?
His smile is permanently frozen.
So, it's like Elden is drawn. Let's go ahead and while Elden tries to get finalized there, if everyone could kind of go around the horn, introduce yourself, and let's do an opening question with what's your favorite thing about the SBIR and STTR programs? Henry, if you want to get us started off.
Sure. My name is Henry Ahn. By the way, there's a little bit of echo, Dale. I don't know if it's...
Yes, for everyone, if you could please turn on your echo cancellation in the gear icon.
Oh. Hello? Oh, that's better.
Yeah.
All right. That's better. I can focus a little better. All right, so my name's Henry Ahn. I'm one of the program directors at NSF for the SBIR STTR program. I manage the biomedical technologies topic, and I've been here for about 6.5 years as the NSF SBIR STTR program director. What's my favorite thing about SBIR STTR? Well, I mean, it's money that companies can utilize without having to give up equity. So I think my interaction, I've worked as a seed investor in the past, but my interaction with the company is definitely a lot more pleasant, since we're giving money where companies don't have to worry about paying back. And I really do enjoy interacting with all the applicants, the reviewers, and everyone's just so smart, and I have a lot to learn from them. So it's never boring. There's always something to learn. So that's one of the few things that I guess I do enjoy about the SBIR STTR program. And those of you who are new to the SBIR STTR program, I just want to emphasize that each agency does have different emphasis. So for NSF, it's seed stage companies and startups. So companies generally have to be very early. So if you do have any questions, I would like to encourage you to reach out to us anytime. We're generally very approachable, and we'd be more than happy to clarify anything or answer questions that you may have along the way. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Henry. Dana?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Dana Catron. I am Deputy Director of Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University, and I'm also the SBIR Program Director for our NMFAS program. And what excites me, we work with a lot of very early stage technologies and clients who are very, very early in their commercialization path. And for high risk early stage technologies, SBIR and STTR, in my opinion, is really one of the only sources of funding that these clients and startups can tap into. It's non-dilutive, equity-free, and it really can kickstart the technology commercialization process. So I love these programs. I'm really excited today to talk a little bit more about them. And thank you, Del.
Thank you, Dana. And Roch.
Hi, and pretty humble to be part of this.
Pretty humble to be part of this.
Is there a lot of feedback coming on your side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did it stop?
That's better.
Okay, something happened. I didn't touch anything, I swear. So we were first-time applicants, and we had talked to a lot of different agencies, and basically, for us, because it was like a brand new industry, which really even had PhDs scratching their head on how to proceed, and of course, you know, when it's a brand new type of industry, your seed investors are few and far between because they haven't seen anything like this before, and there's nothing to show that it will work and or make money. So for us, it was kind of a nice validation that you know, somebody from the government side, you know what, this has potential, and from a small business point of view, when you mentioned that you got a grant, you know, for us from the NSF, it opened doors. People were listening to us, and that does make a difference in the long run. So in short, that's what we loved about it.
Great, thanks, Roch. It looks like Jim actually dropped off. So let's go ahead and get started with the panel here. So everyone, we have, well, Jim's back. Jim, if you want to go ahead and take a crack at answering the question.
Sure. Jim Greenwood, President, Greenwood Consulting Group. I've been involved in SBIR since the inception of the program back in the 80s, STTR in the 90s. Taught webinars, workshops around the country, work with a variety of entrepreneurs, part of the Department of Energy's Phase Zero program, coaching and consulting with small businesses. Favorite thing about SBIR, it's a level playing field. I have entrepreneurs who come to me and they found some federal offering, and it's open to small and large businesses, federal labs, universities, foreign governments, and they qualify. You know, they're in there. And I say, but look at your competition. You're going to be up against Johns Hopkins. You're going to be up against Sandia National Laboratory. You don't have the resources these people have. You're going to get squished like a grape. And frankly, some of those programs are pretty, let's just say, politically motivated. SBIR is a level playing field. It's only you and your fellow small businesses. Now, some of them are quite large. Some of them are quite adept at winning at SBIR, but it's not the really big players. And the decisions are more based on merit rather than politics. So that's my favorite thing about SBIR STTR.
That is a perfect answer, Jim. Thank you very much. So, you kind of heard, or for the audience, and if you were backstage, you kind of heard John mention this during his opening remarks that there's a lot of different variation between the agencies. There's 11 different agencies that utilize the SBIR and STTR programs. And there can be a lot of differences between them, whether it's the research focus, period of performances, funding levels, proposal specifications. Each one of them kind of takes their own vein, their own approach, and those differences and that nuance is something that people oftentimes don't pick up. So, given that, what are a few differences that you think are key to know, and why is that important for an applicant to actually understand? We had Henry start us off, so let's actually reverse our order here and have Jim start us off.
All right. Yeah, there are tons of differences. A good friend who used to be a NSF program director says there's only two commonalities among the SBIR agencies. They all call it SBIR, and it all has three phases, and otherwise they do everything different. A major difference is an agency like Henry's, where he's supporting good ideas. Bring him a good idea that has merit, has commercial potential, is a good innovation, you're well qualified, he's interested in it. You go to the military and they say, look, all I want to see is something that solves the following problem. I've got a mission, I've got a problem accomplishing the mission. Warfighter's life is at jeopardy if I don't solve this, solve the problem. So it's a difference of night and day between how Henry and the DoD would treat an SBIR opportunity, if you will. So in Henry's case, it's bring me ideas, let's advance new ideas. In the case of the military, it's let's solve problems.
And Roch, kind of same question for you. And this is actually, I think, interesting for you from the applicant and the awardee side is, what's something that you think was important for you to know?
So what, and I'll go back to a couple programs I had been involved in at NMSU that trained me to interview customers and everyone within the problem. And in that, I basically just took that exact same philosophy that you learned through the NSFI core training that we had gone through. And what I did was I applied it to everyone who I was looking at for a potential grant. And really listened and read what they were looking for. They'll tell you what they want, and either you have it or you don't. I don't think they want you wasting their time just by using the shotgun approach and hopefully something hits. Although in our particular case, it was kind of cool because we knew our innovation. And we had done our innovation, which kind of shot ourselves in the foot because then they didn't want to fund our innovation because we did it. So then it came down to, what else did we have? But we had innovation within the innovation, which was something that interested them. And so here we are.
I think that's an excellent answer, Roch. Dana, from your standpoint, and particularly kind of having a focus across all of the different agencies as a support organization, what do you think is really important for people to understand about those differences and why it can really affect an applicant?
Sure. So from the assistance side, what we really try to emphasize with clients is, and John kind of touched on this in his keynote, is they're completely different programs, right? And so from the proposal development side, and that's primarily where we come in, is to help develop those strong proposals. It's really, really critical for a startup, for somebody who's going after this funding, to know maybe you are a fit for 2, 3, maybe even 4 different agencies, right? Your technology can fit within multiple agencies, but really understanding, okay, well, if I'm going to apply to DoD at this time, what do I need to be preparing to apply to NSF or to to the other agencies, and how do you organize and plan out how you're going to put in all these different proposals if you're doing multiple proposals. And that's something that I think a lot of, especially first-time applicants, also don't understand is you can submit multiple proposals to different agencies as long as you're not getting funded by multiple agencies for the same project, right? And so understanding those nuances and then really understanding what do the agencies want in that proposal package, because like Jim mentioned, every single one is very different. And so there's different requirement, there's different forms, there's different submission platforms that you may need to submit it on. There's different registrations. And so really understanding and being prepared. And one of the things we really coach when we're working with applicants is if you even think you might be interested in, say, DoD or, whatever those agencies are, just get registered. They're free. It doesn't hurt to be registered for, all of the different agencies. And then, when it comes time to get that proposal together, you're already, one step ahead. So again, we have through our NMFAST program, and I know a lot of the other FAST sites throughout the country have developed many, many different resources for all of the specific agencies, again, because they're different. And you can tap into those and really see what the differences are and make sure you're prepared.
That's an excellent point there, Dana. Henry, I'd like to take a little bit of a different vein to the question to you because you are part of an agency. And Jim kind of clued in the audience a little bit in his answer when he talked about NSF. But for NSF, what is something that you think sets your agency apart from the other ones? And how does that potentially affect the way that someone applying to the NSF, SBIR, and STTR programs might change their approach?
Yeah, so I guess the question's not all that different. So, I mean, as you know, NSF is technology agnostic. So it really doesn't matter what type of technology it is, as long as the innovation is there and the technology that the company is trying to develop, and as long as the commercial potential is there, there's probably a fit somewhere within the topics that we have. When in doubt, just submit project pitch under other topics and we'll review and we'll get back to you and we'll let you know exactly where you need to go. So that's so in some ways that's good, but and as Jim mentioned, we come in very early too, and he mentioned ideas, and I would say if it's just an idea, maybe it may still be a little too early for NSF, but an idea with sufficient evidence that the technology has a potential to work, maybe, that's still okay. So what I think it sets NSF apart is that because of our emphasis on startups and very early stage companies, we don't really have companies that have been around for a long time. And most of the applicants, most of the phase one awardees, they're receiving phase one for the first time. I think the past several years or so, about 60% of our phase one awardees were receiving a phase one from any agency. So this is the very first recipient of SBIR or STTR. Multiple phase ones, probably not very common. We don't have many phase one awardees that have already gotten multiple phase ones, either through NSF or other agencies. So if a company has a long history of being in business or have raised significant amount of money, it's generally a good idea. I mean, technically, yes, they may still meet the eligibility criteria of a small business to be able to potentially submit and be considered for SBIR through NSF, but it's always a good idea for them to let us know how this phase one funding from NSF will work as a catalyst for this company. So that's one of our criteria, whether this SBIR funding will serve as a catalyst for the company. So unless the company has a good reason as to how this can happen, that this phase one funding can really be significant for the startup, it's probably not likely that the company will receive funding.
Nice. Thank you very much, Henry. So there's a lot of, again, kind of those differences and nuance that go on there. And one of the things that is different is the ability to talk to an agency program manager. When you can talk to them, what you can talk to them about, kind of the questions that you can ask them. But we've all heard how important it is to at least open up those lines of dialogue, have that conversation, get those lines of communication going. So, along those lines, what is something that you think, or what's a driver that you think is important to get those communication lines going? And what's one thing that everyone should try to learn during an initial call with a program manager? Let's do some round robin here. Well, Dana, start us off.
Okay. Well, again, coming at it from the assistance org perspective, um, one of the best tips I have is going back to elementary school and learning to listen, right? So when you have a call scheduled, and it may be a one-on-one session like today, or it may be a phone call or a Zoom meeting, or maybe in person, whatever it may be, you're not going to have a ton of time with that program manager, and they're going to be talking to a lot of other startups as well. And so one of the things we really try to emphasize to our clients is use that time. It's very valuable time to listen to what that program manager has to say and really absorb, and don't take up their time by doing all of the talking, right? Because then you're not going to get as much out of that meeting. And so some of the things we do to prepare, quad charts are an excellent exercise for startups to really get you into the frame of mind of, what are those important points that I need to emphasize to the program manager. And the nice thing about those too is you can send them out before your meeting. So you can email those before your meeting so they're prepared, even a one pager, things like that, just so they know in advance what is your technology, what are you trying to do. And I would say for the meeting itself, trying to see and verify. Obviously they're not going to say yes, we're going to fund this with, they can't say that, but they can say, well, this is a really good fit within our mission and topic area, and we're interested in this. Or maybe it's not. And that's also really great feedback, right? Because putting a proposal together takes a lot of time. So you as a startup would want to know if you're not a good fit for that agency. So.
And I'm glad you brought up the quad chart, Dana. For anyone that doesn't know, the NMFAS team recently ran a quad chart webinar, and you can watch a recording on the NMFAS YouTube channel, where, of course, we will be posting all the recordings from today's event, cutting out any weird technical glitches, but a streamlined video for the end there. But I'd like to pose the same question to you, Roch, but a little bit different since you are an awardee. Did you have trouble opening up those lines of communication with, program managers at agencies, and what's something you covered?
No, it wasn't hard. I mean, I think if you are applying for a grant, you should know the most about your technology possible and be able to communicate that technology in as quick a time as possible to get their attention. And then read their body language. I mean, Dana was saying, listen, they'll tell you what they're interested in, what they're not interested in. And when you give them your pitch, it needs to be done quickly, precisely, and you should know your stuff more than anybody. You should be able to impress them. They shouldn't be asking you questions that you've not heard or thought of before. And so in that regard, when we approach them, and again, I don't mean to keep plugging the NMSU program, but it puts you in touch with all of the experts in the United States. And when you're talking to all of the experts, you're getting nuances from next thing you know, you are the expert in that department. So when you go to that person, you know your stuff and they're impressed with it. And in particular, if you've done a little bit of legwork, it shows them that you're willing and can do what they would invest in. Did I answer the question?
I think you definitely did.
Okay.
All right, and let's go with Henry. Let's actually ask you this same question. Again, a little bit of a different focus, because I think it's important for you to kind of cover it from the agency perspective.
Yeah.
Why is it critical for you that open communication, good dialogue with awardees, or heck, even just applicants, is a critical factor And what do you think is a question that everybody should be asking you when they have that initial call or that initial meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions tend to vary depending on the situation. But in terms of a fit, Dana mentioned about the fit within a program, and people can generally get to that answer when they submit a project pitch to NSF. So for NSF, the fit is basically after they hear back from the project pitch. When they hear back, they'll know whether there's a fit or not, and if so, who the program director is that they can reach out to ask questions. So when people reach out to me, I think part of my job is to answer all the questions, clarify things if certain things are not clear, so that companies can submit some good proposals. It's a win-win for everyone. Companies are happy, they get funded. My reviewers are happy because they get to review some really good proposals, and I'm happy because we got to fund some great companies. So my goal is to answer questions. When companies ask me for time and schedule a call, my thought is, okay, this entrepreneur has questions, so I need to go and clarify these things. One thing that I would ask not to do is to just call, just to talk. And I've actually had a call scheduled with somebody, and as soon as I got on the call, the person just told me that he didn't have any question. He said, hey, this person that I'm working with told me that I need to call the program manager and talk to that person. So that's why I called, but I don't have any questions. Do you want to hear about my technology? And I said, well, yeah, I'll get to learn all about it when you submit your full proposal. So I don't really have to hear about it now, but I really want to be able to help you to prepare a better proposal if you have any questions. So the conversation didn't go very far because he didn't have any question and he wasn't on our website either, I guess, to read all the details. So the one thing that I think would be helpful is if a company goes to our website, I mean, as they go through all the contents, such as the solicitation is really thick. So as they go through that information, and as they start looking into our program and looking into the steps involved in submitting the proposal, I'm sure they'll have questions along the way. And I think just coming to the calls or meetings with those calls, I think will definitely be helpful. And we also do have separate Q&A sessions, Q&A webinars. We generally do this every other week or so. So they can always sign up to be on this separate Q&A webinar if they are working on some technologies that are specific to biomedical technologies. And if they want to connect with me, they can always email me and we can go through those questions that they may have.
Great, excellent answer, Henry. Jim, very similar lines for you, with you helping a lot of different applicants over many, many years and your experience with SBIR and STTR. What would you say is something that is critical about those communication lines, and what's something that you think everybody should be asking a question of for an agency program manager?
Yeah, I think it's critical to establish the dialogue in advance, if at all possible, before you get into the proposal, and I think to Dana's point, even before you decide whether it makes sense to write the proposal or not. I think Roch talked about body language, and part of that is very important. How does that conversation go? And if they seem to be really disinterested, or where are you coming from, or I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, you're getting some bad body language that says maybe this is not a good fit. There's also that situation where you hang up the phone and you go, what a bunch of buffoons. I mean, these people are complete bozos in this agency. Well, then why would you want to write a proposal to them if you think that they're that far off track? They're probably thinking the same thing about you, by the way. That's not going to be a good relationship. So you don't want to have that conversation. In terms of what you ask, let me spin it a little bit differently, because it's a balancing act of asking things, but not until you've given enough background that they can answer intelligently, but also not spending all the time giving them background. So I have people who get on there and they've got 15 minutes and they spend 13 minutes telling the program officer what their technology is all about. And then by that point, the program officer is pretty well bored, lost, wherever they are by that point, and there's no time really for a conversation. the other extreme is I just get on, well, Henry, what do you want? And Henry said, well, I'm here to fund innovation. And he said, well, what kind of innovation are you interested in, Henry? And they're asking Henry things that he, is too basic for his agency. He needs to know what you're thinking so he can react to whether that's something he's interested in or not. So it's important to do the dialogue, and I think people have to prepare for putting enough information out there that the agency can react to it, but also not so much that they're dominating the conversation. The other thing I would add, Dell, is just be prepared for anywhere from a terrific conversation to being completely stood up. Some folks are extremely helpful in the agencies, willing to talk, want to give you information, probably want to spend more time with you than you want to spend with them. And then there are others, they cop the attitude, hey, it'd be unfair for me to talk to you. Because I will tell you things that your competitors won't know. Well, then that means you're not going to get anything out of them and won't have that opportunity. So you got to be ready for anywhere in between, anywhere from getting incredibly good information to being stood up, but you got to try anyway, with the hope that you're going to get the former rather than the latter.
I think that's a really great answer there, Jim, and I think you kind of encapsulated a lot of what was discussed. If I could probably put a pin in this question, it seems like it's really important to have that conversation, but come into that conversation prepared. Plan out what you want to ask, plan out what you want to address, plan out what you think is important for you to know about that agency, that topic area, that focus, that fit, whatever is that big guide there that is allowing you to make that decision that this agency, this topic, my innovation. Speaking of planning and preparation, though, for each one of you in your own eyes, how much planning and preparation goes into a good proposal for SBIR or STTR? And why do you think it takes that amount of time? And what's something everyone should do? Let's start off actually with Roch on this one.
I think you called on me because you saw me thinking and I wasn't ready. So I've kind of alluded to it already. I mean, you're approaching an agency and they're showing some interest. You've not wasted their time. You've been prepared to show them exactly what you have and what you're looking to do. In my particular case, and I think I would do a little video. I mean, videos just solve so many things that words just can't do, and that really made it a big deal. Once you know, and I'll say customer, because I do think of the agencies like a customer. You need to treat them like a customer. You need to know where they're coming from, and when you're writing up that proposal, really for us it was really easy. We knew where we were coming from. We already knew how to get there. It was, and yet I didn't expect to get anything back. It was kind of one of those things is like, in a startup you're told no so many times, and in this particular case though, I felt very confident about what they wanted, what we had to present, and so putting that proposal together went really quick because we knew our problem, we knew the money, and we had a plan. And I think in that particular case, they like to hear that. So putting all of that together, that technology of how you're going to take it to the next step to a customer and solve a potential national or world problem, I think impresses people who are willing to invest in you.
Well, even though you had to sit there and think of it, that was a really great answer, Roch.
Thanks.
Now let's go with Jim for your response. I'm trying to switch it up on who goes after who, so be on your toes, guys.
Doing a good job, Dale. Thank you. It reminds me of that, and I'm paraphrasing, but Abe Lincoln was asked, how long should a person's legs be? And he responded, just long enough to reach the ground, from the body to the ground. And I think this is kind of the same answer, because how long does it take to prepare a proposal? it takes as long as it needs to be from where you are right now to having a full proposal prepared. And for some of you, it's an idea that's been in the back of your mind for years. You've done a lot of research on it. Maybe it was in your thesis. You've got your team all lined up. You've been working on this thing for years, and it's really just pulling the pieces together and getting it down on paper, putting it all the forms, shooting it in. Then there are others that are just brand new to this and they've got nothing. And I know, Henry, you see these folks all the time where they've never written a proposal. So they don't have a bio. They don't have any of the paperwork down. They're not registered on anything. And they're going to involve a university that they've never worked with before. And they kind of know somebody there from a conference they met them. And you look at that and you go, man, this is going to be a while for this to pull together. And then there are those that just can sit down at a keyboard and just spit out text just instantly. And then there are those that pour over it and they draft it and they revise it and they massage it, and just so very many variables. And I know that's completely no help to anyone trying to figure out what it's going to take to do one of these. But the bottom line is, to me, is you sit down, and now's a great time of the year because the holidays are here and things are a little bit slower. You sit down and you say, by darn it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to finally do this. And you sit down and you get the instructions out and you get the forms and you start working on it. And you put together a proposal. Whatever it's going to take, you put it together. And you put together what's called a decent proposal. Doesn't have to be a perfect proposal. A decent proposal. You're not embarrassed about sending it in. Shoot it in. See what happens. Chances are real good, and John Williams told you a while ago, 19%, so roughly 1 in 5 of these is going to hit. Chances are real good you're going to get a rejection. But with that rejection, you're going to get some feedback. And now you got a pretty good draft proposal that you can work with the next time and revise and maybe resubmit if it's an agency like Henry's or NIH's or USDA's. Or even if it's an agency you can't resubmit, you've learned some things. And now you write your second proposal and you get better at it and you keep getting better at it. So part of it is just dedicating yourself to deciding, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this proposal together and I'm going to submit it before that January 5th deadline at NIH. And you do it and you see what happens. So you got to be doing the tennis shoe commercial, right? Just do it.
I think you gave us a really good catchphrase there, Jim. Too bad it's somebody else's catchphrase. Don't want to copyright infringement.
No.
Dana, very similar kind of approach to the question with you here, because I know for the NMFAST program, you always like to give people a rough estimate of how long it takes, particularly for the first time proposal. And why does NMFAST quote that number? And what's something that everybody should be kind of taken to heart when they're thinking of that number? And obviously start off with, what is that number?
Sure, yeah. So the number, it's actually a range, but we generally say for first-time applicants, so if you've never put together a federal proposal before, whether or not it's for SBIR or STTR, at least 100 hours. More like, I would say 120 would be a more conservative number. And the reason why is the things that Jim cited, Roch cited. There's a lot of, it's not just the time you're sitting down typing out the narrative, right? There are a lot of different pieces to a proposal package besides the proposal itself. And so taking into account the time it's going to take you to get all your forms together. If you're subcontracting or working with another entity, the time it takes to negotiate that. If you're on an STTR, definitely more than 120 hours, because you will be working with that university or research institution very closely to get those agreements in place and things like that. But there are a lot of different tools and resources that many different organizations have developed to kind of help manage those hours. And so from our side, we've been doing federal proposals for many, many years. And so our clients actually have the benefit of learning from our mistakes. And so we've developed a lot of different resources that have helped us internally at Arrowhead put together strong proposals. So things like a reverse calendar, super helpful. It's really easy to do. You don't need any, fancy software or anything. You can just jot it down on a piece of paper if you want. But writing down when is that proposal due, and then backing up and saying, okay, well, if it's due on the 15th, I need to have all of these things done. And that gives yourself kind of a timeline for making sure you're on track to submit before. And actually, a big tip is don't actually put the deadline, maybe do at least a day or two before the deadline, because inevitably you may run into some issues when you're actually submitting. Other things like compliance matrices, checklists, things like that really help. And for FAST, if you just go to our NM FAST website, we have all of those documents for every single agency, and we update them with every solicitation cycle. So whether or not you're in New Mexico, it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and download those resources. Another tip, and my background is in federal grant writing, and so one thing that we find incredibly helpful, and it helps, it hurts the first time you do it, but then it helps when you're submitting future proposals, is come up with boilerplate text. So you will always have some text that'll remain mostly the same across all different, proposals. Things like your team or your technology, the description of your technology, your mission, all of those different kinds of things. Develop that, and then you can use it over and over again, tweaking it again for the different agencies, the different solicitations, things like that. And then my last tip for this is build in time for review. I can't stress how critical having your proposal reviewed is. I know Jim can attest to this, and probably Henry too. It's critical that feedback you get from an external party who isn't, super close to what you've put together, can really help your proposal and catch gaps or, mistakes that you may have overlooked, because you're so entrenched in the process. It's really easy to overlook some things. So always build in, we usually say at least a week or two, preferably 2 or 3 weeks for review. And that can really help, make it a strong proposal package.
That was a very expansive and great answer, Dana. Henry, with you being last in line here, I'd like to pose this question to you and just ask you, from an agency perspective, do you agree with what your other panelists have said? And is there anything that you think was critical that they missed in their answers?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do agree. It takes a long time. I wish there was a better way to do this. But we need to have enough details to be able to evaluate. So whether it's on the technology side or commercial side, it's enough details need to be there for us to say, hey, their approach is this, it makes sense, does not make sense because of these reasons. So I don't know if there's a better way to do this. We're always looking for ways to do things better, maybe a little simpler, but we haven't found a way to do it, I guess, much better. And I know when people are looking at this for the first time, I know some people are overwhelmed with all the information that they have and all the guideline that we provide in the solicitation. And Dana mentioned about reviewing the document. I think that's also very important, because we've seen many times where documents are clearly written by different people and put together, and some of the information presented are not consistent. So you don't want to have these inconsistencies or contradicting statements, whether it's the approach or on the technical side, even the market size. I think sometimes it's very different. So I think having consistency, or just not repeating the same phrases over and over throughout the document, that I think the reviewers tend not to like that, because they're going through a lot of different documents, and if they have to read the same paragraph multiple times, I guess, as long as all the details are there, I guess in the end it probably wouldn't matter. But you have limited space to put in as much detail as possible. It doesn't help you to repeat things, and the reviewers generally, because of all the information that they have to review, if they have to read the same paragraphs over and over, they tend not to like that process as much.
I think that's a really great kind of summary answer for us there, Henry. And if I could put a pin on kind of this question, I think one of the things that seemed to be addressed by everybody, and we've heard this time and time again in previous summits. We've had, other keynote speakers like Bob Smith from the Navy, who biggest piece of advice to people is always read the instructions. So I think that's a big thing for people. And one of the factors that can take time is you have to read the instructions, you have to understand what goes into it, you have to plan it out, you have to have the knowledge. And as Dana highlighted, you have to give others time to review. Henry even backed that up. Give it to somebody who does not know the idea in and out, hasn't lived, eat, breathed your innovation, somebody from the outside, and see if it's put together well. See if it actually makes sense to them. So for our audience, we have about 25 minutes left in our panel here. We want to leave around roughly 15 minutes for Q&A, so please continue to send those questions into the chat. We will have time to address questions. But let's continue on with our panel questions here. We've done a lot of talking about tools, assistance, resources for applicants, those first-time applicants, critical knowledge. Let's take a tiny step back. And the SBIR and STTR programs are often referred to as America's Seed Fund. But I'd like to ask our esteemed panel here, what does the idea of SBIR and STTR as a seed mean to you? What's something you think people should be aware of in growing their innovation and moving it forward with the idea of seeding technology in mind? Ultimately, what do you think can grow from those? And it kind of does link to our last question because it was all about time. It's very long, very kind of in-depth process. And while seeding, you don't just plant a seed and it grows overnight. You have to water it. You have to nurture it. So as a seed, what do you think SBIR and STTR does to nurture ideas? Let's start off with Jim on this one.
Yeah, you saw me writing, so he got me this time, Roch. So he's pretty good at finding us when we're not quite ready there. A couple of things. One is I want to distinguish kind of how Henry looks at seed versus the way some of the other agencies look at seed, because I want to make sure for newcomers that they realize there's two different perspectives here. Henry's perspective, I think, is more seeding new companies, seeding the entrepreneurs, seeding the early stage companies. So he's very interested in the newcomers, the folks that are just organizing their companies and so on. Other agencies you'll hear, I don't care how old your company is, I want to see new ideas being seeded, innovation being seeded, something that someone hasn't tried before being seeded. So I want to, if any of our participants today are not newcomers in terms of starting company, realize that this is a difference you're going to see across agencies. And if you're not a newcomer in terms of the age of your company, you need to talk to the agency and see if they're okay with that or not. What you're seeding overall with SBIR is, in my opinion, the birth of a new business or the growth of a business, a major step if you're an existing company, because you've been dilly-dallying along, got a few contracts, got a few sales, and suddenly this grant or contract is going to be dumped in your lap with basically you are to do something new, exciting, different, beyond what others have done. So you're no longer just a little company plodding along. You're now, as Roch was pointing out, you're now leading in this area. You may be making yourself the world-renowned expert in this area. So you're really changing yourself and you're changing your company. And as you get into phase 2 and beyond, then you're presumably growing that company and also getting more into long-term revenue from commercialization. And of course, that can mean very different things in many different types of companies. But it means you're not just getting a phase 1 grant or contract and a phase 2 contractor grant, and then go back and get another contractor grant and get another contractor grant. No, you're taking this contractor grant, SBIR, and commercializing it and creating a revenue stream for yourself, so that you now are using that as part of the base of your company. Then you can go out and get other contracts and grants if you want to, build other parts of the base over time. So I think it's an exciting time for a small company, a startup company in some cases, to take it to the next level and really decide we're going to compete at the national level, even international level, at the stage of being on the leading edge of new ideas, new technology, and also with the opportunity, hopefully, to grow a more stable and successful business long term. So it's a very exciting area of seeding.
That was a very comprehensive answer, Jim. I hope our other panelists can also respond in kind. So, Henry, let's go with you.
Sure.
And picking on you here because, NSF always likes to throw around the term seed. What does
Yeah.
seed mean to NSF?
Sure. I mean, Jim provided a very, very good comprehensive summary of all agencies, including NSF, I thought. So, but as far as NSF goes, I mean, we see seed as giving startups and very early stage companies a chance to be able to continue to grow. So I'm sure you've heard of the term the valley of death, the point where many companies die because of lack of cash flow. They're just way too early for private investors to come in, even angel investors to come in, and yet they have to make progress, but they're running out of money. The way NSF sees this seed fund is that we want to be able to bridge that gap as much as possible. So if a company is still trying to de-risk their technology sufficiently so that they can actually go back to these angel investors or VCs that they've been talking to or they are about to talk to and convince them that they have something that's worth investing in. So that's where I think we believe that NSF seed funding should really come in to give these startups a chance to be able to continue to grow. If a company has already gone through, we periodically see this, by the way, where a company comes in and says, in the proposal, it says, hey, we just raised a $10 million Series A. And we're doing all these things, and we want to just kind of more or less experiment with another technology that we had in mind. And I guess going back to Jim's definition, I guess if there's an agency that really wants that other technology, the topic may be of interest to some other agencies. But with NSF, because of our emphasis on the startups and very early stage companies, we believe that company will be able to continue to operate. They're probably financially stable, probably not going to have any problem doing what they need to continue to grow as a for-profit company. So perhaps this is not the type of seed that NSF has in mind, versus some technology that's just starting out. So we look at the company as a whole and whether our money can help the company to be able to continue to grow. I know with most of the companies that I work with under biomedical technologies, they will have to go out, find strategic partners, find private investors for them to be able to continue to grow. They probably can't do without it. I know many of the software companies, they may be able to get to some meaningful revenue even after completing the project with us, the phase one after phase one. So depending on what that company's need might be, we want to be able to help them to achieve those technical milestones that are critical so that they will be able to continue to grow beyond this stage that they may be trying to get over.
Great. Thanks, Henry. Roch, I'm going to pose the question to you, but in a little bit of a different nuance with you being an awardee. For you, what do you think that the SBIR and STTR program and your award under an SBIR has done to seed your idea and seed you getting further towards the commercial market?
Well, and I might even go backwards a little bit. We already knew the commercial market and that no one had done it. We knew the money, how much was being spent on the problem, and we were able to go to our program director and point that out and them realize that and recognizing that, and in particular for my company, it was very...
Uh-oh.
I think we lost Roch.
Now it's Roch. Who's next?
The wonder of virtual platforms. So
we'll never know what very was. I mean, I'm hanging on the edge here.
Well, hopefully Roch can finish that thought off when he gets back in. But while we wait for Roch,
Did I lose you guys?
Yeah, you lost us. We heard very, and then you froze.
I cannot hear you.
Are you there, Roch?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, how much did you lose? How much more can I redo that I did wrong?
We heard very, and then you totally froze up.
Oh, okay. So just to kind of recap, we knew the business, we knew the money, we knew the problem, and the national and potential world problem, and then being able to take it into a business. I think, in particular, our program director really liked that we were able to link the technology and the agriculture, which often don't come together too well sometimes. And it's still not coming to, I mean, it's really convincing. And I think I said cowboy hats and technology and software people coming together. That's a weird world. So being able to merge the two together and be able to convince that yeah, this is a definite worldwide need problem, and it's a business, was huge. The seed money got us through. Yet at the same time, when Henry was signed, we cannot stop looking for angel investors. There are so many aspects of this technology that the grant won't cover. So you have to find other ways to cover it. And so when you have multiple disciplines coming together, it funds one part of the discipline. Definitely puts a feather in your cap for angel investors, but you've got it. It's a constant. You can't quit. It's a constant movement to stay afloat, particularly after the pandemic and the supply chains. It's a very challenging time to stay afloat right now.
Great, thanks, Roch. And Dana, from your perspective, particularly with working with so many applicants, so many awardees over time, with the awards that the NMFAST program has helped people with, what do you think that those did to kind of seed technology, or what do you think is a hallmark for SBIR and STTR programs when it comes to them being a seed fund?
Sure. So I think working with a lot of startups, it's very easy for them to get discouraged, especially when you're working on a very early stage technology. There are so many unknowns, risks. It's a lot of time, money, and so I think the government, the emphasis behind these programs is really they're looking at the end goal, right? And if you think of, I was thinking of some really bad, seed analogies, but last year I visited the redwood forest on my way back to Seattle, which is where I'm from, and to see those trees, I mean they're huge, 250 feet large trees, right? But when you back up and think about it, they started from a seed that's smaller than your fingernail, right? And it's hard to see, especially I think for startups who are you're in the trenches. It's really hard to see what that technology can evolve into. And so I think the SBIR and STTR programs, it's seed fund, right? It's there to help kickstart and get your technology closer to to that mature redwood, right? Again, really bad analogy, but but yeah, working with clients, we try to really emphasize that it sucks. We know it's really hard. We've been through the grant process before too. We've cried and stayed up all night. Dell and I have pulled all-nighters writing proposals. But the reward of going through that process and getting that seed funding can really help your startup, really can help your technology and get you one step closer. Henry mentioned the Valley of Death. It can help bridge that. And it can kind of have a cascade effect, right? So once you get that phase one, we've seen enormous success with getting other phase ones, phase twos, going into phase threes. So I guess from my perspective, I see the programs as really, trying to focus on that end goal and support technologies when they're the most vulnerable and when they're they need that seed funding to get them to the next stage.
Well, and I would actually argue with you on one of the things that you stated, Dana, because I think your analogy was actually almost a perfect analogy. These programs are seeds. People have to essentially bury them, but they have to be nurtured, they have to be developed. People have to take care of them. And I think that you actually hit on a really great analogy there with the redwoods because there are some major international multi billion-dollar companies that got their start with this seed program. Sonicare, 23andMe, although I don't think 23andMe is the actual company, it's the test. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Come on now. Um, Symantec, iRobot, these are very, very, very large, very, very, very successful companies that used SBIR and STTR funding as a seed. They had an idea. They thought it was going to be amazing. They knew it had, like Roch, had really great commercial potential, but they just needed that little bit of start to get over that hump. They needed that investment so that they could cross that valley of death. They needed that non-dilutive funding so that they weren't giving everything up to a venture capitalist and losing control of the business, losing control of the idea. That's what these programs are really about, is that ability to focus on what you want to do, what you want your company to be, the mission, how you want to develop your company, but in the vein of being successful, being commercially successful. Every one of you that's developing a company should have that in mind, right? You started a company because you want to be successful, but you also started a company because you have something to develop, you have something to grow, you have something to nurture. I think that's really important for us to remember when we think about these programs as a seed. So, soapbox out of the way and my soliloquy over. We're going to actually dive into a couple of audience questions here in the last little bit we have in our panel. We did have a couple of them that came in that I think are really important for us to address. Uh, the one that I'd really like to address, because it's something that I know as a support organization, NMFAS struggles with, had conversations with Jim about the struggle. Um, One of the questions that came in from the audience was, is it beneficial to review previously successful proposals or are each unique? I would actually like to put Henry on the spot in answering this one first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I know we've been asked in the past whether we have a sample proposal, and unfortunately, we don't have a sample proposal. And I would say, in some cases, yes, it might be helpful. The way that somebody may have defined the market and the approach to commercialize the technology, for example, the way the milestones are laid out, with the milestones showing exactly what they're going to do, how they're going to go about achieving those milestones, success criteria to go along with them, maybe some potential pitfalls and alternative strategies. All of those things I think could be helpful, but I don't think you'd necessarily need to review these previous proposals. With each solicitation, I think we tend to provide some little bit of a different type of information in the guideline too. So some things may change along the way, but one of the things that we try to do, I mean, provide as much detail as we can, and maybe in some ways may not necessarily be a good thing, because I guess some people get really confused with all the details that they see. But the guideline is very detailed, and so I think it would probably be helpful to just try to go through the guideline and try to put together as much information as possible, knowing that there will be somebody on the other side reading those details, and they need to be able to evaluate the technology. They can't, companies just cannot say we're going to build it and test it and see if it works better. They have to explain exactly how that's going to be accomplished and define what better means. Um, So I think along the way, and some people are really good about providing all the details. Some people do need help. And I think Dell and Dana, and I'm sure you are able to, maybe provide some additional details for these companies that need those details, in more details to be incorporated. So I think they tend to be stronger. But I think the way the solicitation guideline is written, we try to put as much information there for people to know. These are the things that they need to include so that if they decide to do this themselves, they know what type of information to include. But I think in some cases, some entrepreneurs are really good about those things. I think Roch probably didn't need any help, but I know some people, they definitely do need help. And sometimes I see companies coming back after having after going through the review process, get declined for funding. They think they did a better job, but the proposal itself is not much better. And the ratings and review and and this is even after the debriefing call that they may have had with me. And when I see something like that, I generally ask them, well, where do you live? Is there any support group? Is there any small business development centers? Is there any entrepreneur support groups near you who might be able to help you or maybe review and help you understand a little better, help you improve your proposal? Because I think some people definitely do need help before their proposal becomes that much better and or it becomes good enough to be funded versus just struggling along the way. So I think it all varies, but yeah, so that's the way I see it. The samples are good. Don't try to copy. I know some people just try to copy the whole kind of formatting and all those things, but sometimes they're not as helpful. And depending on the type of company, the details will be very different too. So, sorry, that was a long answer.
That is totally fine, Henry. Would like to open it up to our other, esteemed and distinguished panelists there. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to Henry's response or criticize his response? Be combative, anything like that?
Realize none of these samples, if you ever see a sample, it is not a sample of a perfect proposal. It is a sample of a successful proposal. And for whatever reasons, it succeeded. And there's a whole variety of reasons why a proposal will succeed or fail. And this one just happened to succeed. So don't look at it and go, oh, I have to structure it exactly like this. And to Henry's point, if I just kind of boilerplate it and I white out NSF and I pencil in NIH, it'll win, it'll win. It just doesn't work that way. So don't treat it as a perfect proposal. If you can see the reviewer's comments, that's extremely helpful. And I appreciate NIH with their sample proposals in many cases also give you the reviewer's comments. So you can see some of the things that the reviewers didn't like. And once again, it reinforces that none of these things are perfect. Realize the instructions are constantly changing. I work a lot with the Department of Energy SBIR program, and they have a sample commercialization plan on their resources, and so many people follow the example that's provided, which is inconsistent with the current instructions. So they're following the example rather than the instructions. And let's go back to Bob Smith. You got to follow the instructions. They don't care that you saw a sample that is outdated. What they care is that you follow our instructions or not. And finally, I would just recommend, summarizing all of this, a critical review of a sample proposal. So take a look at it and say, wow, I really like the way Roch wrote that, the way he approached that. I'm going to use that in my proposal. And then you continue on and you go, man, I cannot believe that he got funded when he said that. That's something I would never say in my proposal. And you come up with your own style and your own proposal, maybe borrowing some things you think are good ideas from Roch and avoiding some of the things that you think he probably was lucky that didn't sink him.
Great. Anybody else while we are kind of getting ready for our transition here?
I'll add one last thing. I am by nature introvert, And so when I went through the NMSU programs, it was they put you up on stage, and you have to be able to think quick on your feet, and you have to be able to make a quick pitch to somebody who's never even knew there was this problem even existed. So then when it comes time to start doing your NSF or other agency proposals, you're ready. You know your stuff. And so I'm one of those people that can type something out in 5 minutes, and I think it's perfect until, like Dana said, have somebody read your stuff, because my stuff after somebody else, so what are we saying here? I'm not even sure. So I think it's really important to be able to have other people be critical reviewers of what you're doing. Don't be so quick to turn that thing in. And what I can write down in 5 minutes might take 2 weeks to go back through and make it clear. So that would just be my last.
Can I say one quick thing? I mean, and to add to what Jim said. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So Jim mentioned about following the current solicitation, and I think I can't emphasize that enough. And it's been, what, more than a year since we went from phase 1 being 256K to 275K. I still receive proposals for 256K. And I don't know if they're getting that information from our old solicitation that's more than a year old, or from someone who's done this before, but they're just kind of leaving money on the table, but not by not following the current solicitation.
I think that's a really kind of almost great point to end us with there, Henry, is, make sure that you're aware of the changes, make sure that you're aware of things that are happening, because you always want to capture as much funding as possible, because anything that you're leaving on the table is just something you're leaving on the table. It could actually be something great. It could be something really good for you. It could be something that further helps you get there and helps to allay a lot of different hurdles that you could come up with, or that you might actually come across. So I want to thank the panel here for being able to join us. Garrett is having a little bit of an issue, so we're going to actually transition to our next items on our schedule. So, again, thank everybody for that wonderful informational session. And we're going to take a short break, going to reset some of the systems. And in that break, we want to invite everybody to visit the expo hall, connect with others, or simply absorb some of the information you just heard. In the hall, we have booths from support organizations, research partners, and potential funders from across the country. Visit the booths, talk to their staff members, set up a meeting, and just find out more. You can also use the Connect feature on the left side of your screen to meet with other attendees to discuss potential partnerships, possible collaborative growth opportunities, and just ways that you can help each other, because that's really what these programs are about, being able to collectively and collaboratively move forward. Our next panel session is going to be starting at 10:50 a.m. Thanks, guys.